Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass. Thank you for watching this Ag Forecast brought to you by Agrible, the makers of Morning Farm Report. Our software gives growers the insights to make the best decisions possible about their operations. Let's start by taking a look at the last 14 days of precipitation expressed as a percent of normal. The flow pattern for the last few weeks has really been dominated by a broader trough along the western part of the United States and a pretty big ridge over the southeastern part of the U.S. That's funneled quite a bit of moisture up from Texas all the way to Minnesota, and we've been talking about this for quite some time. So it's been very, very wet in the central states, which has really delayed harvest. At the same time that's been going on, there has been very little rain at all across the eastern part of the Corn Belt and, of course, over the southeast. So the question is, how are things transitioning over the next few days? How are they looking over the next 10 days and certainly over the month of October? That's going to be crucial to understand how we continue and finish harvest this year. So again, very wet up the center part of the country. What's going on next is going to depend a lot on the tropics and the position of a boundary that's kind of draped right now across the center part of the Corn Belt. Now, one of the big problems with being so dry is that we've seen the river levels really drop in the eastern part of the Corn Belt. For example, I just grabbed a river gauge from the USGS here showing you the Illinois River at the LaGrange Lock and Dam. Now you can see here that right now the river depth is 6.1 feet. Flood stage is at 23 feet, so we're 17 feet below flood stage. And the problem here is with so many of the rivers that move grain through the eastern part of the Corn Belt being this low, they're having trouble loading up the barges. They can't put too much weight on them, or they will basically not be able to move or navigate through the rivers. So this is a really big issue. The USGS does a fantastic job of keeping a close eye on these river gauges, and we're certainly seeing here that we are low right now, and we want to know, is the precipitation that's coming up really going to help this out much? So let's take a look. Over the last 48 hours, we have seen the precipitation that's been really confined out here to the central and northern Corn Belt starting to move to the east. In fact, all evening long on Wednesday and then early Thursday morning, I've been hearing some rain coming outside of my window here in Champaign, and it's been just fantastic. We're going to need to see how this precipitation translates to the east over the coming days. So let's take a look at it. Here's a forecast produced by the NAM model showing you the precipitation all the way out through Sunday. And let's watch it again here. As we animate this, we're watching that boundary right in through here, continually being fed by moisture from the Gulf of Mexico. And until the cold front finally comes racing through on Sunday, this area right in through here is going to have repeated chances of showers and thunderstorms. Now, it's not a huge soaking event where everybody's going to be getting 2 or 3 inches of rain, but it is at least some rainfall. Now, I know as you're watching this, your eye is certainly drawn to what's going on down here in the tropics. Let's watch that again. You see, over the next few days, we're watching for the emergence of our next tropical system coming right through there. It will most likely be called Hurricane Nate. So let's talk about this, as it could potentially influence the eastern Corn Belt by the time we start next week. So here it is right now. This was late in the evening on Wednesday, early in the morning on Thursday. What we're expecting here is for Tropical Depression 16 to be upgraded to Tropical Storm Nate. In other words, it's going to get a name. And over the next several days, by the time we get into our weekend, the steering winds are going to push Nate right here along kind of the coastal areas of Central America into the Gulf of Mexico and strengthen in the Gulf of Mexico to become Hurricane Nate. Now, there's certainly some uncertainty about the strength of Nate and its eventual track, but it could be impacting harvest efforts here in the eastern Corn Belt by the time we get into early next week. So let's take a look at the controlling factors on the strength and the direction that Nate's going to go. First, strength. The sea surface temperatures where Nate is going to be moving through are warm. And as a consequence, if Nate is not negatively impacted by the fact that part of it's going to skirt along land here and we're looking at some higher wind shear values, Nate has the potential to really kind of rapidly strengthen. But again, those limiting factors are wind shear and the interaction with the land. So let's take a look at wind shear next. You see, we look at maps like this to kind of help us understand what the potential impacts of the change of wind speed and direction with height could be in a hurricane. And in a nutshell, hurricanes hate wind shear. The higher the values, which you see kind of in these red colors, the worse the conditions are for the hurricane, which means it's going to help knock the hurricane strength down. And Nate right now ahead of it has a pretty kind of windy path, and the hurricane's not going to like that. This could potentially limit the strength of Nate over the coming days, which is what we want to see. Now the question is, are these wind shear values going to stay this high over the next 5 days? And the longer range outlook suggests that it will, which will keep Nate from becoming a strong hurricane, at least in the current forecast. But again, we're 4 or 5 days away from this, a lot of uncertainty there. Now, what I want to show you is kind of the longer range outlook for precipitation as forecast by the GFS model. We're kind of keep this running over and over again in loop. So this is a 10-day forecast. Before we talk about Nate again, I want you to see how that boundary is kind of sliding farther to the east, bringing quite a bit of precipitation over the next 10 days to parts of Iowa, northern Missouri, parts of Nebraska, and Kansas. And it's also going to be hitting parts of Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. So this is the movement of that boundary kind of coming forth here. But it's looking like next week could be a little bit drier. So a lot of this precipitation you're seeing accumulating here is really at the end of this week and the beginning of next week, and then slowing down probably by the end of next week as some drier air moves in. But check it out. Nate moves onshore and potentially brings some extra precipitation to parts of Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, and then far eastern here where we grow some corn. So we'll keep a close eye on this as Nate moves onshore here in the southeast. Very important factor. Moving forward. Just to show you some model agreement, here is the ECMWF, the next 10 days of precipitation as forecast by that model. Again, where that boundary hangs out here in the central states, we see that there's some heavier precipitation. What it does look like, though, is for parts of Arkansas, parts of Missouri, parts of southern Illinois, looking to be a little bit drier than the northern regions just north of there. But certainly you can see the impact of Nate moving through this part of the country, potentially hitting those fields in Ohio right now at this very crucial time period for harvest. Now, we turn our attention towards temperature. In my last video update on Monday, I was a little bit concerned about the beginning of next week having a frost event. But over the last couple of days, the models have really calmed down on the amplitude of the trough ridge pattern. And here's what I mean by that. You see, by the time we get in toward the end of this week, really most of the Corn Belt is going to be seeing a broader ridge feature, keeping us near average to warmer than average. It was this trough I was watching closely as we moved into the weekend, because as that trough evolved over the weekend, it was looking a lot deeper by the time I get into Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And that was going to indicate, some cooler temperatures that could bring a broader frost threat, which is about the normal time of year that we get them, all the way down into parts of Iowa, Illinois, and maybe even Indiana. Now, we will be having a cold front coming through on Saturday, and that's going to bring the tail end of the precipitation that we're going to see over the next few days through those same states. You can kind of see the reflection of that right here. But this is really broadened out, and it's not going to be deep enough to bring a frost pretty far south. But I mean, it will be cool in the northern tier states. So think Montana, the Dakotas, northern Minnesota, and Wisconsin. But watch what happens after this. You see, what we tend to keep doing here is developing a trough out west, and that's going to reinvigorate the chances for precipitation in the central states. But if a broader ridge establishes here over the southeastern United States, that tends to keep the eastern Corn Belt warmer than average and drier than average, which means after this weekend's precipitation, we may move back toward a drier pattern here in the eastern Corn Belt. Now, Nate's going to slide up right underneath that and dump rain on the far eastern Corn Belt, but overall, if the pattern establishes itself such that there's a broader ridge factor here, that's really spelling out warmer than normal conditions and potentially drier. And that's what we see. We really see that ridge. Look, I'm all the way into next Wednesday, the 11th, next Thursday, the 12th, Friday, the 13th. We're really, Friday the 13th. I just realized we're going to have a Friday the 13th. Sorry, it's a little late, and I was kind of excited to see what Nate was going to do. I forgot we're going to have a Friday the 13th next Friday. Anyways, back to the weather. See the ridge that sets up here? This is really what's going to kind of keep things calmed down in terms of precipitation and keep some temperatures warmer. And it's because of that feature that the long-range ECMWF model that came out just a couple of days ago tends to keep much of the Corn Belt warmer than normal, while the western Corn Belt tends to be cooler than average. More troughing here out west, cooler than average. More ridging over the southeast, warmer than average. But listen closely, please, please, please. This does not mean that every day is going to be warmer than average over the next month. It just means that if the pattern settles into a broader ridge over the southeast, we'll see some warmer temperatures here. So that's the key factor moving forward. In terms of precipitation, where that boundary is set up right now, it's biasing everything wet in this region, and so the model's picking up on a wet bias for the next 32 days. So this is mostly dominated by the wetter weather we're going to experience over the next 4 to 5 days, not necessarily seeing that the next 30 days are going to be wetter than average in this area. See where that ridge is influencing things over the southeast? They're calling for a drier bias here, but remember, Nate's going to slide right up underneath this, keeping this whole area wet. So this map isn't truly representative over the next next 32 days of what precipitation is going to look like. But I wanted to kind of bring in those key points there. Now, we got to turn our attention at the end of this video here to South America. And this is what I want you to see. I'm going to animate the last 7 days of precipitation as measured from satellite. And what you're going to see over the main growing regions, so Mato Grosso all the way down to Argentina, is that the rains have finally returned. And this is going to be very good for the Brazilian crop. They're going to be able to get that water in the soil that they need, which they can then get planting going really rapidly here. So this has been a bit of a switch over from what we've seen in South America, with some timely rains finally coming in to help with the planting season down there. So with that, I'll go ahead and wrap up this forecast. We hope you look forward to Agrible's next ag forecast coming out on Monday. To get Morning Farm Report for your operations, complete with a daily email that shows a snapshot of your field conditions each morning, go to morningfarmreport.com. Sign up for that free account. Full grower accounts are free if you sign up for our Sustainable Yield Program or for growers who work with 80 merchandisers. Thank you. I look forward to talking to you again on Monday. In the meantime, keep a close eye on the tropics as Tropical Storm or Hurricane Nate could potentially impact the Eastern Corn Belt. Talk to you next Monday.